Welcome to Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things, the podcast show. I am your host, Carrie Roberts, and today my wonderful guest is Ashley Bernardi. Welcome, Ashley. Excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much, Carrie. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, we were just talking. You live down in Northern Virginia, where I used to live, and it's always neat when you meet people for the first time and kind of reminisce and connect with areas that you both know. So excited to have you here, and we are talking today about this concept of what if you allowed yourself to feel. And I am somebody who I love human connections and emotions, and I'm someone who feels deeply, and I'm curious for you, before we kind of get through, kind of some of your experiences, were you grown up, in a family or with friends where people did talk about their emotions, or were they the type that kind of swept it under the rug? Like, what was kind of the talk around emotions when you were a kid or a teenager growing up?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I don't think I've been asked that. I want to say that, I come from a half Italian family. And so we definitely share emotions in a safe way. But I also at the same time think that we've been culturized in society to not express our emotions. So despite having this very openly sharing family, I think all of us, and especially where my father's upbringing, which was in the military, you are supposed to be stoic. You don't show emotion. You are strong, and you wear that mask of strength. So for me, I was always told that I was strong. You are an army colonel's daughter. You are to be seen and not heard. You are to speak when you're spoken to, and you are to wear that mask of strength everywhere you go. Now, I want to say, like, to my parents, both amazing, loving parents, they did a great job. It's not anything that they did or didn't do. This is how society has shown us that we need to show up as a strong women, especially strong women. We don't miss a beat. We have all of our crap together. And so I want to say that despite being raised in, I would say maybe like my family who, my mom or her parents were first generation Americans, it was very open. But I think as the time went on here in our culture, uh, we were silenced. And so I was raised to be strong no matter what happened in my life. And I thought, even after my childhood trauma, that I needed to be strong because that was what was expected of me from society.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and this idea of the word strong. I mean, as I get older, it's interesting that I've changed definitions of words. And I think strength is one. And it's interesting you're saying, even as a woman, to have that put on you. Because a lot of times we hear it's more on the male side, don't show emotion, you're the one in charge, you need to be strong. And then they feel it on the inside. But you're right. Now there's this kind of new idea that women are expected to kind of push through as well. And for you, I know one of kind of the main areas of trauma that you talk about in your new book that you experienced was losing your dad at a very young age.
Mhm.
Can you kind of talk a little bit about, briefly that experience, but more so about what you felt at that moment and how it kind of maybe changed or didn't change as you got older?
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to take you through that. I really quickly just want to touch on that one really important point that you made, that as women, we're supposed, like, we feel like we're supposed to be strong. And I think we're living in such an exceptional, extraordinary time for women. There are more women CEOs now than ever. I am a CEO and founder of my own company, Nardi Media. But at the same time, we think that in order to kind of succeed in life and get ahead and break that glass ceiling is to be strong, to wear that mask of strength, where I'm saying, no, give yourself permission to feel, be vulnerable, and show up as your true self and in the moment and what you are feeling in that moment. And I think more you'll attract more customers, more people in that way. So I just wanted to say that because I thought what you brought up was so important, especially as a female founder and CEO myself. So
Yes.
going back to my trauma, is that, what, you're right. When I was 11 years old, I lost my father suddenly in front of me, and it was a very traumatic experience. I was raised, like I said, in a military family. I was born in Schweinfurt, Germany. We lived in California, ended up in DC because my dad was at the Pentagon. Happy family up until I was 11 years old, when I went to tuck my dad into bed one night. He wasn't feeling well, and the last words I said to him were, "I love you, Dad." And the last words he said to me were, "I love you too, honey." And from there, Moments later, he started suffering from a heart attack. And my sister was 9 years old at the time. They tag team CPR on him while I ran out to call 911 and got help from the neighbors. I don't know why I ended up doing that. I can't tell you why it was like me doing that versus my mom or my younger sister doing it. It was just in that moment, that's just what we did to try to save his life. And unfortunately, we learned that his heart was 90% blocked and he died.
Mm.
And it was so devastating. It was a shock to my entire system, to my entire body. And from there, I did what I felt I needed to do for my dad, which was to be strong, to hold it all together for my mom and sister, who I felt were probably falling apart, but really I was also falling apart too. But I felt like I needed to be strong because I was that Army colonel's daughter after all, right? And instead of addressing my trauma and my emotions, despite getting help, my mom is like, I'm going to get you the best grief therapist in the country. I did not want to talk about it. I did not want to address it. I'll never forget, like, I was, in sixth grade when he died, in seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, I would meet friends. I would not even tell them what happened to my dad. People would come over. They would just have no idea. I would not even go there. I would not even address it. And so I just buried my sadness, buried my trauma, buried my grief, didn't visit his gravesite, went to the funeral once. Went to the funeral and that was it. Didn't want to acknowledge it. And what I learned later in life about what happens when you bury trauma is that it's, first of all, you store a lot of crap. You keep, like, and it's going to come out in other ways. So for me, it came out in ways that looked like people pleasing, lack of boundaries, destructive relationship with alcohol, work addiction, anything that I could do to take my mind off not feeling my own feelings, I would do it. But on the outside, I looked like I had it all together. I was an Oscar-worthy actress of making my appearance look like I was fine. Like in high school, I'd like to think that I was well liked. I was captain of my dance team. I was secretary of my class. In college, I was president of my sorority and editor on the newspaper. But on the inside, and maybe if you knew me really well, I did not have my act together in any way. I was so sad. And it was exhausting bearing how I was really feeling for so long, but I did it for a really long time. And it wasn't until I was in my early 30s that I was hit over my head with another trauma, which was like the sign from the universe that, okay, Ashley, it's like, this is it. Pay attention now. Where I had a mystery illness that like left me completely bedridden. And at the same time, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. So I had just delivered my third baby, and these mystery illness symptoms just came back. And when, like, I'll give you a description of what it was like, but I feel like I will never be able to put into words what I was physically feeling. But imagine waking up and feeling like you have the flu every day, but times that by 100. I had encephalitis, swelling in my brain. I lost my vision. I lost ability to process foods. I lost ability to, I lost feeling in my arms and my face and my legs. I was in constant pain up and down my spine, nerve pain. I mean, every single symptom in the book, you name it, I had it. And I'll never forget coming home from a hospital visit one day. I was taken by ambulance because I had lost control of my bowels. Like, that's the most embarrassing thing to admit, but I think it's important to paint a picture of how sick I actually was. I lost control of my bowels and I lost my vision at the same time. My mom told me that she thought I was going to die that day. She was with me. I was in an ambulance. And I came home. My husband had taken our kids to his parents' house because no one wanted to see me like this. I didn't want my children seeing me like this. And I just like fell on my knees on the floor. And I was like, God, this is it. You can take me now. Nothing is in my control anymore. I surrender. And in that moment, I started feeling feelings that I had been bearing for a very long time. And to me, I really feel like it's like my body had nowhere else to store the trauma. It was completely overloaded. And so I see this mystery illness, which eventually was diagnosed as Lyme disease and postpartum depression, as my greatest gift and wake up call, because that was the gift that allowed me to feel the feelings that I had been bearing for over 20 years. And once I started feeling all the feelings, that's when my healing and transformation happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us have been there, whether we want to admit it or not, in some capacity, where it always shows up physically. I mean, there are times where you go to the doctor and they're like, I don't see anything wrong with you, from a science perspective. Or we feel pain or we feel not right. People use that term. Sometimes it manifests into something more severe, like you just said. And there's so much that people push aside or they think that they've dealt with. Um, there are some people, that, like you said, I mean, I've interacted with people who have had trauma in their life, and they don't talk to me about it. I don't want to talk about it. Let's not. But then they're closed off to everything else. And then they're getting stressed out in these physical things. And it's very hard to be on the other side also and say, well, I can't support you if you can't support yourself. And, did you were you noticing, because you said again, 11, your father passed away, you're in your 30s. So about, 20 more years that you're feeling this. Did you start to notice in those 20 years, like these red flags within yourself, like, oh, something is off or this needs to be fixed? Or was it not until like that moment, where you said like, oh my gosh, I feel like this is the end, and the stuff started coming out?
Yeah, I think this really goes to the title of my book, which is like my authentic power. I always knew, I felt like I was missing something and I wasn't sure what I was because I wouldn't address it. And
Hmm.
what I learned was that I wasn't like, what I've learned is that we are our experts in our own life, right? Like we think we can get all the answers and get healed on the outside with the magic elixirs, the medications, the mastermind groups, all the things. But what I learned, and that's what I was seeking. I was seeking
Yeah.
outward validation all of those years. I wanted to be so well liked. I was such a people pleaser. I was a yes person. I had no boundaries whatsoever. I practically killed myself with having a lack of boundaries. And I think I pissed off a lot of people in doing so because I had lack of boundaries. But what I learned was that I already had the answers within me. And it's when I got quiet and still in those early moments of Lyme disease and started listening within. And I learned that there is a voice inside me. Like I am an actual person that can make my own decisions and can actually feel my own feelings. And when I discovered that, I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is my own authentic power, which I define as the wisdom that we all have within us. And it's about getting quiet and still listening to that wisdom that we have within us. And then in turn, trusting that wisdom. And so I went on this journey of listening and honoring and accessing my authentic power. And that is how I healed my life. I started listening to what I felt like I should be doing to heal. Some of those things were the most unexpected things I could tell you. Like I joined my church choir. I hadn't sang since high school, but I used to love singing. So I had this like listen to this little calling, like, okay, Ashley, go sing. It was the most beautiful experience I've ever had. The other one, running, nature, meditation. I mean, I could go on and on. But it was when I got still and quiet, listened to that calling within me, was when that true healing happened. And I also want to say, what my authentic power told me to do, which is all in my book, doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you should do to heal your life. Like this is what worked for me. And so I shared in my book my journey of like, here's some samples of what worked for me to heal from trauma and to give myself permission to feel. And it all starts with giving yourself permission to feel. But the yoga, the journaling, the meditation, the breath work, the sacred writing, the singing, the dancing, all of that, that works for me. It might not work for you, but what I teach is I use those as examples that this is what happens when you actually listen to that voice within you. And you can call it your divine voice, your spirit. For me, it's just that knowing that we all have within us. It's when you get quiet, still listen to it, give yourself permission to feel all those feelings. That's when the healing and transformation happens.
Yeah, and I know you were talking about, we hear a lot of this from Oprah and from other people, and you kind of built on top of that. And I know I've done, in the past, sometimes where you're like, okay, I'm being still, you're like, I'm not hearing anything.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you want it to come. And
Yeah.
there are other times where I love the alone time because, like you just said, it tells you so much, where you do get these feelings or voices of, you need to do this and you don't know why. And
Right.
I'll talk to other people and say, have you ever felt this? They're like, what are you talking about? And then I talk to someone like yourself who's like, yep, I know what you're saying. So how do we, and I don't know if you want to kind of talk a little bit about in your book, kind of this feel acronym you have here, but how does somebody start even getting in a mindset of, first of all, that I can help myself? And what you just talked about feels foreign and weird, maybe to
Yeah.
some people. And again, I've been told to be strong, so I should just keep pushing this aside. So how do we even get to that mindset if somebody's not there yet?
I love that question. And here's what I want to say to anyone who's listening who's not in that mindset. I am with you. I was right there. I used to never sit still. You can ask anyone who knew me. I mean, I was all over the place, never stopped, couldn't sit down to meditate, would laugh at the idea of yoga. I mean, truly, I was that type A person that laughed in the face of meditation. And when I first tried it, I got through 10 seconds and I was like, screw this. This is not for me. But you know what? Something told me to keep coming back to it. So I did it for 10 seconds and then I did it for 30 seconds for like a week. And then I went for a minute for another week. And then I extended and extended. And here I am 6 years later, and I can meditate for hours if I wanted to. It gets me in such a bliss state, but I just don't have the time to sit and meditate that long. So I just want to say this, and I've learned this is such an important part of my healing journey, is that first, it's baby steps. You are not going to go from never meditating to meditating for 10 minutes. You're going to hate it if you do it. You'll probably even hate getting still for 10 seconds. When I go through my coaching programs, because I'm a life designer, a life coach now, and I ask people to sit still and do 10 breaths, they're like, that was the hardest thing I've done all week long. And I get that. So start small, even if it's just 3 breaths, do that. So then I'll take you through the feel framework. So this is something that I taught myself when I was going through my incredible life-changing crisis, but also gift at the same time. And I call it the feel framework for a couple of reasons, is that this is how I taught myself to feel. I was like so many people, I didn't want to address those messy and uncomfortable emotions, but now I teach that your mess is your message. Your mess can be your masterpiece if you just allow yourself to move through it. So the feel framework has helped me do that, and it might work for you too. So first, I want you to start by focusing on that emotion that you feel. What is that feeling that's coming up? Sometimes you can't identify it. You just feel like something's off. I felt like that today a little bit. I've had a lot of really random life things happen, like daughter in quarantine, house issues here. And the feeling was frustration, but I couldn't identify it. So what do? You then just sit with it. Okay, I'm feeling off. I'm feeling something. Maybe it's sad. I'm angry. I'm grieving. Pause and acknowledge it. Next, and this is the thing that people don't do because it's so uncomfortable, allow yourself to enter within that emotion. What does it feel like to actually feel that emotion? Biologically, science shows, and if you go through the history of humans, back to cavemen, and I interviewed Dr. Jamie Hope, an ER physician, in my book about this. What did cavemen do when they were angry? They hit their chest. That's what gorillas did, right? They would punch something, they would throw a rock. We're supposed to process and move through our emotions in a safe and loving way. So enter within that emotion. Next is experience that emotion. So that can look like a lot of different things, whatever you're feeling called to do. For me these days, it's often done with meditating. I'm just allowing myself to focus on that emotion. And sometimes if I'm sad, it's really interesting what comes up. I'll start laughing uncontrollably. And it's just that energy that's getting moved out of you. And I'll give you another example. I went through a Reiki certification a couple years ago, and I had someone doing Reiki on me. And Reiki is an ancient healing modality where you move energy through the power of your hands. Out of nowhere, I burst out laughing. I can still to this day not tell you where it came from, but the Reiki master was like, "This is good. These are emotions in you that are coming out. This is energy that's stuck, that's been coming out." So that's where
Oh, I think we lost you for just a moment. Go ahead, continue.
I'm going to wait. I don't see Carrie yet.
Oh, I see you. I can hear you. So I can hear you, Ashley. I don't know if you can hear us, if there's a little bit of a delay. But I know you're kind of talking about this idea again of being able to feel these emotions and express them, and be able to let them out in whatever way is possible that works for you. So I think that that's really important that we have. Okay, you're back. Go ahead. I was covering you, so you were kind of talking about the second E.
Yes. Okay. The second E, and then the experience part of this. And this is where I was talking about really letting what's supposed to happen in your body and happen. So maybe it's laughing, it's crying, it's screaming, it's meditating, it's breathing through it, it's journaling through it. Experiencing that emotion can look however you want it to look, and it can take as long as you like or as little as you like. And I would say if you're a beginner, maybe it's just 30 seconds of allowing yourself to cry and being like, okay, but you will feel so much better if you get that energy out of your body because it's meant to be processed. And then the last part of the feel framework is listen, learn, and love that emotion back. So listen to what that emotion is trying to tell you. I feel like we all want to process and experience joy by laughing, happiness by smiling, but we don't give ourselves permission to feel those messy emotions. But they're here to teach us something in the same way those positive emotions are here to teach us. And what is that? So get curious about that. So learn, what can you learn from it, and ask yourself. Next is love that emotion back. I mean, we are all human beings. We're here on the planet to feel all the feelings. That is the gift of all these emotions. So let yourself feel them. And last, listen, learn from it, and then love it back. So love it for being there, because I want everyone to just learn to love those emotions no matter what they are. They're indicators that we're alive here on earth, and they're here to teach us something.
Yeah, I love that. And like you were saying, you kind of have this new book. It really breaks it down in much more detail for people to see. But I think, this overall message of asking yourself that question, are you allowing yourself to truly feel, and knowing that it is okay? And I just wanted to share just a little anecdote from my life. I know for me, I frustration is a big one for me. And sometimes I feel like, okay, I have to be professional and I have to be the bigger person. And talking to my therapist, who is wonderful, she said, sometimes it's okay to feel that emotion, and it's okay to feel those things and to let it out. And she had talked about, maybe it's not about suppressing and being calm, but about letting the energy out, like you said. And so I got back into boxing, and what a difference.
Oh my gosh, I
Right?
love that. And doesn't it, I did kickboxing today. How amazing, right?
It is. And sometimes you need to calm it down. Sometimes you need to let it out, and again, like you said, whatever kind of works for you. And it's amazing how you can do it in a way that's not destructive or hurtful to someone else, but it just gets it out of your system. So it doesn't turn into some sort of disease or like some of the illnesses that you experience. So I love that you're sharing that. If people want to get the book or they want to learn more about what we're talking about, where is the best place to do that? And you can show the book if you'd like as well.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. So here's my book, Authentic Power, Give Yourself Permission to Feel. And what I love about it is that there are places for journaling too, because journaling has been such a huge
Yes.
part of my healing journey. And there are journaling prompts in here too. So just a really fun, interactive book. You can find everything that you need to know about me in the book on my website, which is ashleybernardi.com, ASHLEY, Bernardi.com. And you can get Authentic Power at all the major bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, you name it.
Perfect. And the last question I like to ask all of my guests, and I'm curious for you now, considering you've been through this process and we continue to go through it, is what is one word or quote or mantra that you try to live by every single day?
Oh, good one. And I talk about this in my book. So this is for anyone who is really struggling right now. And I know a lot of us are 2 years into the pandemic.
Yeah.
Remind yourself that this is temporary. If you really are going through a hard time, and this is one of the reasons why I didn't give myself permission to feel for so long, because I thought that if I allowed myself to feel the grief and feel the pain, I felt it would never go away. But every moment in life is temporary, the good,
Mhm.
the bad. So especially when you're going through the bad, a mantra that I tell myself is that this moment is temporary. I'm not going to feel like this forever. I'm not going to be this upset forever. I'm not going to be grieving in this way forever, even though I think grief goes up and down for anyone who's ever lost anyone or anything, a job, a spouse, anything. But remind yourself that these hard moments are temporary and it's not going to last forever. That would help me get through some of my darkest days, even if I didn't believe it at the time, because I really did feel like I was going to be sick forever. But reminding myself that it was temporary helped me move through those harder days.
I love that. And I congratulate you on just your own journey of growth and continuing to do that. Every single one of us is doing that constantly, and more so than others at certain times. And that's so great for you to then create this book and be able to share that with others. So thank you so much for sharing your story and some tips for us today, Ashley. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Carrie, and to you for providing this incredible healing platform to share voices. It's amazing work what you're doing. So keep it up.